Yeah, no, absolutely. My name is Enrique Guzman. I'm a landscape designer, owner of a design build firm here on the Central Coast. We're pretty close to San Luis Obispo, where I went to university for the LA Department Landscape Architecture. And yeah, we specialize in design build.
And you guys are located in, is it Grover Beach? Is that still where we're out of?
Yes, we're in Grover Beach. We're pretty lucky to live so close to the beach. Actually, my office is just 5 minutes away from the coast, so pretty nice.
And how far is that? I'm not familiar with Grover Beach. How far or where along the coast is that? Is that north of Slow? Where does that put us?
We're just south of Slow. The area that I'm in is called Five Cities. The reason it's called Five Cities is because if you blink, you basically pass all five of them. It's Grover Beach, Oceano, Aurora Grande, Pismo, and I think Shell. It's most five little cities, and it's a small area. Mhm.
And have you been there the entire time you've been in business? Is that where you started? And
No, actually, I started my business in the Bay Area. I used to work for a high end residential firm in Redwood City, and I kind of started doing a little bit of moonlighting here and there, just to kind of get my feet wet and just honestly, I always wanted to start my. I knew I wanted to start my own business, but I wasn't sure if people would actually be interested in buying me because a lot of what we do as business owners is what part of it is the visual. The other part of it is how you can communicate with your clients. So I wasn't sure if anybody would be interested in working with me, right? Because again, like that's a big part of business. So moonlighting gave me the opportunity to start getting my feet wet and starting to build a little basically a little bit of a safety net in order for me to transition from working full time into my business. Eventually I got to the point where I had more work than I can keep up with on the moonlighting side. It made perfect sense to leave my full-time job to start Contexto.
yeah, yeah. And that how long were you moonlighting to get till you got to that point?
I think it was maybe about a year or so. But I started really getting some traction and really developing relationships. And a lot of the relationships that I have even now with old general contractors or architects I work with are still from those early days.
Nice. Is that were you? Has it always been design build? Did you start doing design? Did you start off doing build and kind of put that together, or how did you progress your, I guess, from the moonlighting into your business?
That's a great question. So yes, originally the first three and a half years of Contexto, I mainly just worked in design. I just loved really doing the residential landscape design projects and working with a lot of architects and general contractors, like I mentioned earlier. Really opened our doors to work in different areas of landscape. But I would say about the after 3.5 years, I decided to step into contracting. It was something I always wanted to do, and I wanted to have a little bit more control about the quality of our installations. And besides, Pablo, I was already super involved on the installation side. And one of the things that we do as designers is that I know that a lot of landscape architects or other landscape designers they offer construction administrative services, and that is sometimes and usually a really small aspect of an LA firm. On some occasions, you may not even be getting paid to be involved in some of those conversations. I find myself being far more involved in doing CA type work that I decided at that point, you know what, I might as well get paid fully to really manage the installation of the project the way we see fit.
Yeah, that's a good point because like on my end, it's when we are involved, it's really kind of, I don't want to say hit or miss, but it really depends on the project and the client on whether or not and how much involvement we have in that CA process, right? So we're either full on and we're have scheduled meetings, we have, where we're reporting to the client, field observations, answering questions from the contract, like a pretty involved process, right? And then there's times where we have no contact with until the very end, where you ask, "Hey, where's your project at?" And it's been done for months, right? Because we never got a call or anything like that. So, yeah, that's cool that you get to just see it all the way through. You're the ones that design it, you're building it, and then you can follow up through that. I guess you're kind of answering your own questions as far as when it comes to like RFIs and stuff, right? And submittals, you're handling that in person
Totally.
on your own
Yep.
work. Yeah. Um, what has been, I guess, following up on you starting up your own firm? What were some of the bigger challenges when you first started? I know you have a team now. Has it always been that way? How did that grow into what you have now?
That's a great question, man. Honestly, because when I first started, I was like most business owners that are in this field, like yourself, and I've talked about this with other colleagues, is that none of us actually went to business school. You know what I mean? We're figuring it out as we go, right? And there's some growing pains with starting a business, right? Because especially when you're first starting out, you're doing everything right. A lot of us go into the profession because we love what we do. We're excited about designing spaces and outdoor, and our minds get lost in planting and in flow and circulation. But as your business continues to grow, you have to wear more hats, and some of those hats are things you're not usually trained for, right? Somebody's got to do marketing, somebody's got to do sales, somebody's got to do accounting, somebody's got to do the billables. So eventually, as time goes on, as the business starts to scale, you start losing more. You start losing control of the original things that got you into the business to begin with, right? And that gets really challenging because for us, for Contexto, during those first 2 years, we were experiencing immense growth. We were growing so fast, and that's another thing too. You always hear people talk about scaling, right? I always hear about. I've heard that term before. Don't grow too fast. What does that actually mean? Well, you don't actually know what that means until you're actually in it. When you're actually in it and the business is growing quickly, the quality suffers if you're wearing too many hats. And so that was around the point, that 2 year mark, when I was working 16-hour days every single day, 7 days a week. It feels good to know that you're coveted. It feels good to know that somebody wants the clients want to work with you. You know what I mean? But on the you're burning the midnight oil, working late, and it's exhausting. So it's double pronged. You know what I mean? And I do remember having a conversation with my wife after that 2 year mark, and I was like, honey, you know what? I'm burned out. I'm exhausted. I remember having 16-hour days, getting home around midnight, 1 o'clock, after finishing a design, and then I had to drive all the way to the Bay Area from SLO. I had a meeting at at 8 or 9 a.m. 3 hour drive, which meant I was only going to see 4 or 5 hours, and just being exhausted, just like, oh man, why am I doing this? This sucks. You know what I mean? I don't know if I don't know if you've had that. It sounds like you have maybe at some point in your life. I see you smiling, Pablo. But I just remember like feeling like, you know what? Either I stop what I'm doing, I quit this whole thing, or I go and get some help. And that's exactly what I did. You need the help. You absolutely can do it all by yourself. The first person I hired was a bookkeeper. The bookkeeper cleaned up my books. They really helped me with the financials. They really helped me with invoicing. That took a huge burden out of my plate for me to focus on a couple other aspects of the business.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because on my end, I feel like with design build, there's a lot more at stake as far as when it comes to the running the business. There's different parts of it. Like it's almost like you're doing two businesses, right? You got the design portion and the construction part, which for me it's basically just design. Um, but yeah, it's getting to the point where yeah, we got to start looking at people to bring on to help with just getting the work done, right? Or like I have a payroll system. It's pretty easy. Budgeting's pretty. The budget stuff that we have, our accounting stuff is pretty basic because it's not. We don't have a big team. It's for the most part me myself.
Hmm.
So it's easy to follow, but I can see right away as soon as I'm adding somebody else, all that stuff gets way more complicated. I'm gonna have to reach out to other people and have them help out with all that stuff, right? get an
One
HR
of
team and all that.
Yeah, one of the benefits about where I am located geographically is the fact that I'm so close to Cal Poly. And Cal Poly has been a really great source for internships. So we've actually hired quite a bit of interns throughout the years that I've had Contexto of just really bright students that come and work for us to get that experience and to help us out. And that's also one of the scariest things to do also as a growing company, as a growing business owner. It's really scary to start even thinking about employees. How do you how can you um, step into running a business without really knowing what it takes to to take care of an employee financially, but also like understanding like all the labor laws that apply to having an employee, right? What is the difference between a 1099 employee and a W-2 employee, right? When you start working with employees, these are these little micro lessons that are super important to know how to run a business. And then also having, I think my advice for anybody who's starting a business, who's scaling, who's starting to get to that point where they really need the help, start with a part-time employee or start with an intern. An intern is just a great way to really learn the ins and outs of labor laws, of just managing an employee, without fully committing to having somebody there full time. Once you can get a rhythm and ebb and flow of how to run your business with an employee, you can definitely go on ahead and hire that if they're long enough and they're learning your office standards. That's a perfect person to hire full time.
Yeah, yeah. It'd be different if you bring someone on full time from the get go, and then you're. I feel like it would just cause more problems for you down the line during the thing, and especially when it comes to like just having the work, right? Like for me, it's like a couple of years ago, I was actually actively looking to hire somebody on because I had about it was three projects that would have kept me busy for like a good amount of time, right? And I would have needed the help. Two of those projects completely fell apart. That they didn't go through with the what
Mm-hmm.
we had to cancel our contract. They had this whole issue with them. And another one, the scope of that project like was cut in half. So there was
Mm-hmm.
no way at that point that I was going to be okay with having somebody come in because there was literally no work for them, right? So that's the kind
Totally.
of stuff that I want to avoid. And you're right, bringing on someone part time or at that internship level that you can kind of not necessarily slowly, but there's time for you to get them up to speed and involved in how you're doing things. But also, I'd be learning how to manage them, right, from the business and employer employee relationship part. Yeah,
Yes, yes,
yeah.
definitely.
Um, so it's as far as your work, so it's Central Coast work. It's got a pretty specific sort of climate, right? You have a lot of foggy mornings, I would imagine, maybe some of the foggy days,
Hmm.
but some really, pretty sunny days as well.
Hmm.
Is there, how do you approach that? Do you have any, like in Southern California, there's like the go-to plant material for our area, right? Also that helps with water usage, right? Want to make sure that that water usage is low. Um, for the most part, that's kind of how I like to design, where we're not just overly designing plant material where we're over watering or have to use a lot of water. I would imagine that goes into play within your work as well, right? You're kind of managing how that all that plays out as far as conserving water and making sure that you're not I'm just curious what because I know the climate's way different or slightly different, but so do you have like a plant palette that you go to and then kind of use that throughout? Is it specific to each? Do you have microclimates in your area? Like how does that play out?
That's a great question. Yeah, so the climate zone here in Central Coast is, I think it's 9A 9B, which is a pretty standard. And then we have basically two large areas. So San Luis Obispo County has which is like down in San Luis Obispo area. We have five cities, and this is a little bit more coastal. And then you have Paso Robles, which is North County, basically, and that's like blazing hot. And like right now, I wouldn't be surprised. Like right now, outside of my window, it's cloudy, and it's usually like in the 60s here. But I've been in meetings where like I come to work, I'm wearing a sweater, and I'm like, okay, cool. And it's here in Grover, but then I drive all the way to Pass when it's 100 degrees, and it's way different. It's 40. It's something that could be even like a 40-degree difference. So obviously, when we work with our clients, we're always approaching it from the kind of plant typologies that we can actually use and select. And we mostly always go with natives. Native is usually is the way to go. But there are a lot of Mediterranean plant palettes right out there, right? So we have a lot of plants from, horticulturally speaking, you have a lot of plants from South Africa, you have a lot of plants from Australia that you see have integrated themselves really well into the kind of Mediterranean plant palette, right? You see things like see things like kangaroo paws, you think leucospermums, leucodendrons, proteus of all types, bougainvilleas. So there's a lot of plants out there. Even olives are not actually native to California, but they've become such an integral part of the Mediterranean climate culture that they're almost synonymous with like mission style planting, right? I actually was reading an article the other day. I was actually did a presentation on. I was interested in knowing what kind of plant typologies were present when the first Californios were here. What kind of plants they had in their garden. There was actually a rose that actually drew my attention. It was called the um, what is it? Gosh, I forgot the name of it, but it's basically a pink rose, and that was a really common rose. That was a Castilian rose. That's what it was. It's called the Castilian rose, and it was brought over from the old world. And that plant was actually one of the very first exotic per se plants that was pretty often seen in the early California gardens. That was very interesting to me, and also learning about how the California gardens they also had a lot of star jasmine vines close to windows because it would bring in the fragrance into the house. So everything about the landscape back then was very purposeful. They obviously used a lot of fruiting and plants that were herbs because everything was very serviceable, right? So it's something they can actually they can eat or they can add as a spice. They didn't really have fencing, but they used cactus to create the fencing to create borders from wild animals like wolves or bears. Well, San Luis Obispo used to have a bunch of grizzly bears back in those days, but eventually they got completely wiped out. But that's why we have the state flag has a grizzly bear on it, and so it was really interesting just like learning about how Californios used the garden in the early days, what kind of plants they used. They obviously used a lot of natives, but mainly the natives served a purpose. And so, and actually, if you go back to the name Contexto, the word Contexto is Spanish for context. And the reason I named my business Contexto was because there's a couple of reasons. Number one, it's Spanish. I'm a Latino in this industry, and we talked about this too, Pablo. Just like I love the name of sitio. I think it's a wonderful name. So that was one of the reasons. And the other part of that to us is contexto means context, right? We're always looking to the site in order to inform design. So I'm always looking at the existing context, whether it's architecture, whether it's geology, whether it's plantings, and then bringing that in to the spaces that we design.
Yeah, yeah, very cool. For those spaces, is there any particular or specific materials that you're looking to use in your spaces? I know there's you get a lot of that salt air in that area, right? So that might be damaging to some materials. Is there anything specific that you look to um, that you like to use to that would do well in those areas in that type of atmosphere?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm a big fan of ornamental grasses. One of the most common ornamental grasses you'll see here is Molenbergia rigens, deer grass. It's a really beautiful native that does really well. If you're looking for shaded areas, planting for shaded areas that are summer dry, I'll use Salvis pathacia, which is hummingbird sage. It's kind of a low ground cover. It's got a great scent. It does really well under oak trees. We work with a lot of clients here that have a lot of oak trees. And oak trees actually, it's really hard. It's really hard growing a lot of plants under oak trees. They're very similar to eucalyptus trees in the sense that they almost outcompete anything that grows underneath it, right? So it's really so finding the right and I think also like being an observant. Like I go on a lot of mountain bike rides. So when I go on a ride, I'm not just writing, I'm also observing. I'm seeing what kind of microhabitats are occurring below an oak tree naturally. And you'll see that Salvis potassea, hummingbird sage, is one of those proven winners that does really well. It's beautiful. It's very fragrant. You'll also see Achillea, Sonoma Coast, which is like the white one. Those are really cool, really small, compact. You'll see a couple other little grasses. So I do have some plants that I like to use. Those two. I love Carex, Progressilis. It's another plant that I really like. So there's definitely a lot of variety in plants that we'll use.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, it's I think that hummingbird that it's been getting, it's not difficult, but it's very limited what we can use under oaks in this area. There's not a whole lot that does well underneath
There's
it.
not, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It's pretty limited.
yeah, yeah. When it comes to your work and your clients, is there a specific clientele that reaches out to you? You have a pretty uh, like specific aesthetic to your designs, and I'm wondering if that's something that that's specific to your clients, that they reach out to you, that they're looking for that to kind of look and feel, or is it pretty random? I don't know how do you go about how do clients reach out to you, and are they asking you to develop something that they seen on your website? How do they go about that?
That's a tricky question, Pablo, because I think a lot of us in the design field, we don't want to feel like we're getting pigeonholed. I don't know if that makes any sense. I think I've had conversations with other designers, and they're like, oh, I sure hope that when you're driving around town, you're like, oh, there's a contextual design right there, or there's such and such. You know what I mean? I feel like a lot of us, we want to feel like we're unique enough to where we can actually have a lot of variation. But I think generally speaking, the areas because of the place where we live, right? We live here on the Central Coast. People really love the outdoors. There's usually really great views. And so I think that a lot of the clients that work with us, they're really looking to work with us because we can give them that indoor outdoor experience. We really love to, there's a word in our field, right? It's called the borrowed view, right? How can you make your space feel bigger, right? And you can do that by basically incorporating what you see out in the background. And then add, like, for example, I did a project on my website. It's in Morro Bay. The homeowner is basically their backyard is the marsh, so it's like right in the bay, and you can see Morro Rock in the background. And originally we were talking about how can we make a space feel bigger, right? So I was like, why don't we add a couple boulders, to create this retaining wall that actually will create a functional space, upper area that you can actually look into the bay, and let's incorporate some natives that kind of basically uh, kind of fade into the existing marsh. I think we did poppies, we did Salvia clevelandii, we did some Muhlenbergia rigens, and then we also did this custom fence that looks like a pier. Anyway, it really makes the space feel bigger because those boulders, the little rocks, rock retaining wall, they tie into that big rock at Morro Rock, right? So there's this kind of like it really just ties itself in, and we're really trying to blur those lines. So I think, yeah, a lot of the clients that we work with, they really love that we have that type of vision.
Nice, very cool, man. So it's nice to see that you're thinking about those things when clients reach out. That's the kind of stuff that they might not be thinking about, right? When they're just, hey, I need a design for my backyard, that kind of thing. Very cool. Enrique, I think this is a good spot for us to wrap up. You mentioned your internships, or is there, can we direct someone to reach out? Do you guys do you announce when you do you take interns? Is it an annual thing?
Yeah, no, we're always hiring. We love it when students reach out to us. So if you're a current landscape architecture student, or even if you're an alumni or you're looking for work, feel free to reach out to us. Well, again, we really love working with the youth.
Thanks. Yeah, we'll include links to your website in the show notes. Enrique, thanks again for joining me, man. Appreciate your time. Thanks for hopping
Thank,
on.
thank you, Paulo, so much for the time. Really appreciate it.